Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're diving into the ultimate high-performance organization, the living organism. If you're a busy executive, you already know that keeping a complex operation running smoothly takes constant resource management, energy production, flawless logistics, and, well, strict waste control. And guess what? Biological life operates on those exact same strategic principles. It's running continuously in the background, literally just to keep us alive and healthy. We're going to decode the biological engines that power this incredible machinery.
Pose this question to yourself. What fundamental tasks must all living things actually perform to maintain their bodies and, stay alive? Think of it this way. Just like a massive corporation absolutely cannot survive without acquiring capital and managing its internal ops, an organism can't survive if its basic metabolic machinery grinds to a halt. There's this baseline level of continuous, nonstop biological maintenance that's just required. And that brings us directly to our core definition, life processes. These are the essential, completely non-negotiable processes, like respiration and digestion, that work together to do the heavy lifting of body maintenance. And here's the kicker. They have to operate continuously, day and night, 24/7. Because if they don't, the system breaks down. They're literally what keep living organisms alive.
So I want you to think of these as your 4 core operational departments. Right here, you can see the foundational pillars. We've got digestion for resource acquisition, respiration for energy production, circulation taking care of internal logistics, and excretion handling waste management and regulatory compliance. Literally every single living thing on this planet relies on these 4 pillars.
Okay, here is our strategic roadmap for today. We'll be covering, number 1, nutrition, which is fueling the organism. 2, respiration, unlocking the energy. 3, transportation, the delivery system. And finally, 4, excretion, removing the waste. Let's jump right in.
Section 1, nutrition, fueling the organism. Because let's face it, you can't run a complex system without raw materials.
Now, when it comes to sourcing those materials, the biological world is basically divided into 2 main strategic models. On one side, we have autotrophic nutrition. Plants are autotrophs. They're the ultimate self-sufficient startups, synthesizing their own complex organic food right from simple inorganic materials like CO2 and water. But on the other side, we've got heterotrophic nutrition. Animals, fungi, we're heterotrophs. We just don't have the hardware to synthesize our own food, so we have to rely entirely on autotrophs, either directly or indirectly, to sustain our supply chain. Notice the sheer elegance of the autotrophic model, specifically photosynthesis. Just look at how wildly efficient this is. Green plants take in carbon dioxide through these tiny little pores on their leaves called stomata. They draw up water from their roots, and they use that green pigment, chlorophyll, to trap sunlight. They literally take light energy and convert it into chemical energy. This creates high-energy carbohydrates and spits out oxygen as a byproduct. This single biological manufacturing process is basically the ultimate source of our entire global biological economy. It provides food and oxygen to virtually everything. But for us heterotrophs, the consumers, getting those nutrients is, well, a bit more involved. It requires a very strict 5-step pipeline. First up is ingestion, which is just taking the food in. Second, digestion, breaking that complex raw material down into simpler, usable forms. Third is absorption, moving those digested nutrients straight into the bloodstream. Fourth, assimilation, where we're actually utilizing that food for energy and growth. And lastly, egestion, which is the removal of any undigested waste products. So the really crucial point here is that whether you're a microscopic single-celled startup like the amoeba on the left, or a massive multinational corporation like the human body on the right, you still have to execute those exact same 5 steps. The amoeba just uses these simple temporary extensions called pseudopodia to literally engulf a food particle and form a tiny food vacuole to digest it. Meanwhile, the human digestive system uses this incredibly complex alimentary canal. We're talking specialized organs like the stomach and small intestine, complete with chemical enzymes from the liver and pancreas. It's 2 entirely different levels of structural complexity, but they're achieving the exact same strategic goal. Moving right along to Section 2, respiration, unlocking the energy. Because acquiring food is only half the battle, we actually have to unlock the energy trapped inside it. To extract this energy, organisms use cellular respiration. And there are 2 distinct pathways here, really depending on resource availability.
Aerobic respiration is your high-yield process. It requires oxygen, takes place deep inside the cell's mitochondria, and man, it releases a massive amount of energy, around 30 ATP molecules. Anaerobic respiration, on the other hand, happens when there's no oxygen around, right in the cytoplasm. It's a much lower-yield process. It releases way less energy and leaves you with byproducts like alcohol or lactic acid. So oxygen is essentially the ultimate biological multiplier for getting a high ROI on your cellular fuel. If you look at this flowchart, it maps out exactly how this chemical breakdown happens. Everything starts with glucose, right? A 6-carbon sugar. It gets broken down in the cytoplasm into a 3-carbon molecule called pyruvate, which generates a small amount of initial energy. But then the process branches. If oxygen is present, like in our own mitochondria, that pyruvate is completely dismantled into carbon dioxide, water, and a huge energy payoff. But without oxygen, say in yeast, it ferments into ethanol and carbon dioxide. Or if there's a sudden drop in oxygen in your own muscle cells during a really intense workout, it actually converts into lactic acid, which, by the way, is exactly what causes those terrible muscle cramps.
Okay, section 3, transportation, the delivery system. We've got our nutrients, we've got our energy, but listen, none of that actually matters if we can't distribute it to where it needs to go. Let's look at how plants manage this massive logistical challenge. They use 2 very specific conducting pathways. The xylem is in charge of transporting water and dissolved minerals upwards from the roots. And what's truly amazing here, this upward movement doesn't cost the plant a single drop of energy. It relies entirely on the osmotic pressure pull created by transpiration, which is basically just the loss of water vapor from the leaves. Now contrast that with the phloem. The phloem transports the actual food products created during photosynthesis from the leaves down to the rest of the plant. This process is called translocation, and unlike the xylem, it actively requires the plant to spend its hard-earned ATP energy. Now, for humans and other complex organisms, we rely on the circulatory system, which is driven by a masterfully engineered pumping organ, the heart. Notice the concept of double circulation we're seeing here. Blood actually travels through the human heart twice during just one complete cycle. You've got pulmonary circulation, which pumps the deoxygenated blood over to the lungs to pick up fresh oxygen. Then you have systemic circulation, which takes that freshly oxygenated blood and pumps it out to the rest of the body through these thick elastic arteries. This 2-loop system is absolutely brilliant. It ensures a highly efficient, constant supply of oxygen and nutrients to our very demanding tissues.
Which leaves us straight into our final operational necessity. Section 4, excretion, removing the waste.
You see, running a complex body generates some pretty toxic byproducts, and those have to be cleared out. The excretory system's main job is removing these harmful nitrogenous wastes, things like urea and uric acid, right out of the bloodstream. But it's really not just about taking out the trash. It's about maintaining strict internal stability. We're talking regulating water levels, balancing pH, and keeping perfect ionic and osmotic equilibrium. It is an absolute masterclass in biological quality control. At the very heart of this filtration plant are the kidneys, so the renal artery brings in oxygenated blood that is completely loaded with these nitrogenous wastes. Once inside the kidney, this blood gets filtered through millions, literally millions, of microscopic processing units called nephrons. Check out how the blood enters this tiny cluster of capillaries called the glomerulus. That's where waste, water, glucose, and salts are initially just pushed out and filtered into the Bowman's capsule before traveling down a long tubular structure for some serious processing. Just look at this number, 180. The human kidneys form an absolutely astonishing 180 liters of initial filtrate every single day. That's practically a bathtub full. And yet, we only excrete about 2 liters of urine. Why is that? Well, because as that fluid moves through the tubular part of the nephron, all the useful stuff, the glucose, amino acids, and any excess water, gets meticulously reabsorbed right back into the blood. Talk about an incredibly efficient recycling program, right? And that really brings us full circle today. As the source material so perfectly puts it, all these processes, nutrition, respiration, circulation, excretion, work together to keep an organism alive and healthy. They aren't just isolated, siloed departments. They form a deeply interconnected biological engine. So as you go back to making those high-level strategic decisions today, ask yourself, how well are you managing the ultimate trillion-cell enterprise that is your own body? Are you actively fueling it for high-yield performance, or are you running on a biological deficit?